Happy May 8th, all my favorite shadow people. We're right in the middle of eclipse season right now. We had a solar eclipse at the end of last month, and we have a lunar eclipse in another week. Historically, these are considered times of unexpected change. It's actually interesting if you read back historically, and even today, a lot of royal families won't go near the public during eclipses because, especially a solar eclipse, was supposed to represent the death of a king. I believe it's still true that the British monarchy won't do public engagements on those days. So interesting to see. But for us common people who don't happen to be royalty, maybe you've noticed some unexpected things coming up in the past week. I know for myself, right after the eclipse, everyone I knew caught COVID, and they weren't people that hung out, so it wasn't like they caught it from each other. Just all of a sudden, everyone is dealing with that, and obviously there's some natural progression there because I know it's been increasing in some areas. So, but just interesting to see kind of all the erraticness going on around me, and hopefully after next week's eclipse, it starts to calm down a little bit. Just a little housekeeping before we get into our practice. I did complete my Mars through the Zodiac astrology shadow work bit, a long video, but I've broken it down and put timestamps in for your specific sign. As well, there's a video on Introduction to Astrology on how to look at your birth chart. So go back to those videos if you get a chance, because Mars is a really useful archetype in our lives to look at, especially if you're feeling stagnant and unable to move, if you're feeling a lot of fear or anxiety in your life. It talks about our ability to defend or protect ourselves and our ability to move forward. So that's one thing. Always check out the website if you get a chance, shadowcraftcult.com. And there's all of our videos up there, and as well my consultation services for reading birth charts if you're having a difficult time figuring yourself out or figuring out some direction in life or love or anything that's kind of got you stumped. The birth chart is a beautiful place to do a deep dive into shadow work. This week we are looking at emotions we avoid. And I think for most people, there's always one emotion that they avoid. Historically, or kind of categorically, I would say that men naturally are more likely to use anger or experience anger than sadness. Not that they experience it more than women, but that they're societally accepted to experience anger, as in it's okay if men get upset about stuff by shouting at things, but if they're crying, we consider it a sign of weakness. Not me personally, obviously, but in this society, we've created this kind of weird split between the sexes where women are allowed to be emotional, as in be sad or upset by things that way, but they're not supposed to raise their voice, and men raise their voices. So just looking at that broad overview of things, which is not true for everyone, but might be something that you understand for yourself, looking at emotions that you feel that you're not allowed to experience or you don't want to experience. So you start to do things in your life to try to avoid them at all costs. And we just want to dig down into that because usually there's a story behind why we aren't allowing ourselves to experience that emotion. And obviously, all humans have all emotions, which I don't know if that's going to be a shocker for anyone, but I think it's important that I point out that there is not a human that was born, well, maybe there's some rare conditions, but there's not a human that was born without the ability to experience all the emotions, and life brings all those emotions to us. So if you're in the world, you are being exposed to them. So I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to start noticing which emotions they avoid. And I would like to point out some people actually feel like they're not allowed to feel happiness. That's actually more common than maybe we realize. And obviously that can be very life limiting if you're not allowed to feel the full spectrum, even the positive ones. Just the purpose of digging down into this is the more we become aware of what emotions we are avoiding, the more likely we will start to notice them and maybe create a little space around them that'll allow them to exist within us and be experienced. I do think that if we avoid them, they don't actually go away. They just get repressed, and it's very common. It's a weird concept, but it's really common. We talk about how the world can become a reflection of what we don't want to experience. So essentially, if you repress a lot of anger, you might experience a lot more angry people around you or a lot more angry situations coming at you out in the world. And I do find that's very true. So if we're trying to avoid a certain emotion, it's not that it doesn't end up existing still. It's just that sometimes we project it outwards and we see it in the world more. Sometimes we get health problems off of repressing it so much. There's just a lot of negative side effects of the avoidance of these things. So just wanted to bring that up so that we can start doing these practices to bring them into our awareness, because even becoming aware of them in ourselves allows that energy to flow more, and it creates less of a blockage, and it also helps us to decrease the amount of these situations happening in our lives just as a side effect. It's not even like an active thing we have to do. It just kind of plays out that way. Looking at our questions for the journaling this week, and remember, you can always write your journal, just do a meditation on the questions, whatever works best for you. The questions are: what emotion do you avoid experiencing the most? Why don't you want to feel it? How do you avoid feeling it? Do you notice any side effects from avoiding it? And are there any memories associated with this emotion? And maybe do some stream of consciousness writing with that one, with the last question about any memories associated with that emotion, because it'll probably dig down deeper as you keep going into memories you might not even remember that you have. That's a good one to focus on. I will include the questions at the bottom in case you want to review them and use them again later in the week. For our shadow practice this week, it's kind of a weird one. We're going to allot ourselves 5 minutes a day to experiencing whatever emotion it is we feel like we're kind of pushing down that day. And this can change throughout the week. The emotion can be a positive one as well. So if we're not allowing ourselves to feel joy. And the way we want to do it, this is one technique that I think is really helpful, is taking a playlist of songs that are directed towards that emotion, because I find most songs have some sort of emotion attached. I'm sure you're aware on some level if you think about it or not. And if you don't already have songs associated with that emotion, I think it's really beneficial to make a couple little playlists for yourself for this activity. And it's a good practice anyways, because sometimes it's good to really delve into an emotion fully and just allow it to be instead of thinking about it a little bit here and there. Take the time to make those playlists or get a couple songs together. If you really can't think of any songs, there are people online who make playlists specifically for emotions. I might attach a few into the notes at the bottom. What you're going to do is set your timer for 5 minutes. It's really important that you put the timer on, because otherwise you won't allow yourself to fully experience the emotions. What you're going to do is check the clock every 2 minutes. And after you've started the timer, you can start your music, or if you want to do it in silence, you're allowed to, but I find sometimes we need a little nudge to get ourselves going in the right direction. During that 5 minutes, you can do whatever you want. So for some of the more exuberant emotions, you might feel like moving around and dancing. Absolutely fine. For the sad ones, you can dance too, but I find sometimes you get a little bit more of a need to curl up into a ball feeling. And for something like anger, you might want to don't punch the wall, but punch something you can punch that's not going to get hurt. Stuff like that. Just looking at the natural movements of your body, not feeling like you have to do anything specifically, but allowing that to happen naturally. And notice your brains need to editorialize everything you do. We're just going to keep moving back into the body. So it's okay to notice that the brain's trying to tell you a story about what's happening, but just observe it and then go back to experiencing. And that's the entire practice for the week, but I do think it's beneficial if you work it in a couple times just to get yourself used to relaxing into that experience. It does allow emotional energy to flow, and I think that's something we don't get to do on a regular basis during the weeks. For our last exercise is the grounding exercise. Bring us back into our body. We're going to do something that moves kind of in the opposite direction. For this exercise, we want to be sitting. You can be standing if you need to. Lying down's okay. You might fall asleep, just so you know. This is actually an Eckhart Tolle practice that he speaks about: the silence, the stillness, and the spaciousness. While we're sitting, taking some deep breaths, we're going to start with our eyes closed. What we want to listen for is the silence between any noises or underneath the noise. And if you become aware of this, you will notice that there is silence underneath everything, even if there's noises happening. We want to take a few breaths and just focus on that silence. And then we'll move into our stillness. And with our stillness, we are feeling for the parts of ourselves that are not moving. And even when we have movement, there's a sensation of stillness underneath that. So just starting out as we get used to this feeling of feeling the parts of us that aren't moving. And often you might feel almost a hum in those parts. And it's like a life feeling or a feeling of aliveness. And that's completely normal. You can just breathe into that and feel it as fully as it's there. And for our last part, we move into spaciousness. And you'll need to open your eyes for this, but try to keep your eyes relaxed. You're not searching for anything in particular. What you're going to notice is the space in the room. That means the area between the objects that is not full of anything. And if for some reason this is difficult for you to perceive at first, you can always hold up your hand and spread your fingers. And just notice the space between your fingers. And just relax your eyes onto that nothingness. Every time your mind wanders back to an object, bring it back to the stuff in between the objects. And hopefully you'll carry that stillness, silence, and spaciousness with you this week, but feel free to return anytime you're feeling a lack of grounding. And we'll see you next week.